Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Show 6 podcast, where we break down the Championship Series for Pokemon GO. This week, we're taking a look at 3 events, being Curitiba, Seville, and Houston. In Curitiba, the King of the South, Harjef, claimed his 6th title. Although Politoed was a great early meta read, it was far from the spiciest pick in Top Cut. In Sevilla, Palasha took EU's spice up another level, leaving her mark with Piloswine, aka Paulaswine. A top 4 of all Spaniards rounded us out, and the title stood in Spain in the end. Finally, we conclude with Houston, where Florida native Elam poured rocket fuel on an already illustrious career. All of this and more in this episode of the Show 6 podcast. So if you're ready, good luck, have fun, and lock in. Welcome back, everybody, to the show. Welcome in new viewers and listeners, as well as our returning community members. It is me, Speedy's Chief 2, with my co-host, Z's Wireless. ZZ, we've been away for a while, and we have a mountain of content to get through, but we're going to get through these first 3 events first. How are you feeling?
Yes. I was checking our YouTube channel today, and we are up to date with our episodes. However, I originally thought we weren't because the last episode was from 4 weeks ago. So really, we have we have a lot to get through. It is the 10th of April currently, so we actually are progressed much further than the 3 events that we are talking about in this episode. But yeah, we're splitting this recording session up into 2 blocks, so to not overwhelm anybody. But yeah, I feel as if there has rarely ever been this many things to talk about, so it's time we get to it.
I know we have such a backlog, and thank you so much for shouting out to the YouTube channel. If you want to watch a video version, you can see all the funny faces that we make. You can see the costume actually that ZZ is wearing today. He wears a different costume every time. It's themed, it's seasonal, and now now it is NBA themed. So if we have any ballers that are listening, you should definitely shout
Yeah.
out to your favorite team, which I'm sure is also ZZ's favorite team. But you're right, ZZ. We've got a lot of content to cover. We have 3 events here. I have a special interview clip that we're going to do for the very first time. I asked one of our champions to give us some thoughts on the tournament and how it went, and we're going to play it as a pre-recorded bit. So I'm really excited to hear that, because that'll be our first foray into kind of a guest episode. But I wanted to ask you first, ZZ, just briefly, because I'm so curious. You just wrapped up dinner. What is a typical German dinner? I'm so curious.
Okay, so today it was actually just like I ordered Greek takeout because I cooked for myself the entire week, and today I was just lazy. I wanted to just eat my food, record my podcast, and not work on all the things at once. A typical
Fair.
German dinner, however, is even lower effort, kind of, because in Germany we have this, I would call it bread culture, whereas around the world, oftentimes bread is seen as something unhealthy, maybe like a very simple food to eat.
Mhm.
Germans really love their bread. We have like all those different doughs, all these different seeds on the bread, and the bread rolls, the Brötchen, and then we have a selection of cheeses, meats, vegetables that we eat with these little bread, like whether it's like the slices or the bread rolls. There's like so much variety, and the typical German dinner, or like the typical German day, has like consists of a warm lunch, but mostly this bread-based dinner for the most part. Obviously, that can change for special occasions, but just as like a day-to-day thing, the so-called Abendbrot is very popular in Germany.
That's so fascinating. And you know, my apologies to all of our European listeners who already know this, but to me, as an American, it's fascinating. I'm sure the same way a lot of Europeans will look at people in the US and they'll say, oh, they probably just have a hamburger or pizza for dinner. And that's just the American thing to do. And sometimes, yes, that does happen. But my picture of Germany was you are going to have bratwurst for dinner and you will enjoy it. Yeah. That's just kind of like what I anticipated. So it's interesting to hear about the bread culture.
So there is certainly also a bratwurst culture.
Okay.
But I don't know. Like my favorite way to consume bratwurst is as like a little bit of a snack to go. Like especially like think of a German Christmas market when
Mm.
when it's like freezing outside and you get this warm currywurst and you have like your little wooden fork that you pick into it. You have the sauce, you have the fries with it. Sometimes you have the little bread roll as well because again we're a bread country. But yeah, obviously you can also have it as just a proper dinner. But yeah, like
I
I
still
prefer
remember
my bratwurst as a snack.
I still remember Frankfurt 2022 EUIC, the first event Pokemon ever had, or Pokemon Go ever had an official broadcast for. Myself, Butters, and Caleb walk into a shopping center in Frankfurt, and we say, you know what? We're in Germany. We should try some authentic German food for lunch. We shouldn't just have McDonald's or Chipotle or whatever. So we pick out this German looking restaurant, and essentially it's just a chopped up bratwurst in a little bowl, and then there's like ketchup and some mayonnaise and some like pepper shaken over top of it, and then they hand you a toothpick, and you just eat the bratwurst like that. And that was like our experience there. So it's just so
This is
funny to
like
me.
relatively authentic German. The other authentic German, this like street food is the Döner kebab, which you would think is Turkish, but it's actually kind of been developed in Germany by like the guest workers from Turkey that came over in the 50s and 60s. So it's like there's like I don't know like 3 to 5 million Turkish people or people with Turkish heritage in Germany, and they have greatly enriched our food culture ever since the end of World War II and the rebuilding era that followed. So yeah, actually like the doner kebab that you see everywhere, that is actually German and not just fake German.
Interesting, and that's so fascinating too, because people will say, "Oh, a hamburger is American." Nope, it was invented in Hamburg, Germany, literally in the name. But easy enough about food. I don't want to derail the show too much. As fascinating as I find the cultural discussion, let's talk about Curitiba, and I'm going to try to say that correctly for the remainder of the show. But I guess we can start broadly with the meta. I'll have a meta graphic up on screen if you are watching our YouTube version. And yeah, did you see any standouts in the meta or anything that really just pops off the top cut to you?
So I think one thing that is very special to this event is just the prevalence of Politoed, not only on the winning team but also on other Brazilian trainers' team. So that is certainly a spice pick that people may not have had on their lists as much. Politoed obviously a beneficiary of the mud shot buff, now reaching the strong same type attack bonus move of Weather Ball in just 8 turns, and also having Ice Beam as coverage for Altaria, which was still a very prevalent choice in this event with 50% Altaria in top cut. But other than Politoed, which is like the little spicy star of the show, I think the
Hmm.
more important aspects of this showing are the wider meta trends, where people expected low kick Annihilate to be a big player, and now it didn't
Mm.
even make the top 12 in terms of just sheer usage, and really felt like an underwhelming start to life for this supposed new meta threat. Whereas the actual big winner that some anticipated but didn't actually know to which degree it would dominate the meta is Fortress, which now
Mm.
has the newly improved Sand Tomb as an option to not only lower the defenses of your opponent but also do a decent chunk of damage, which it previously did not do. It was a plus 15 damage buff. And yeah, Fortress apparently started immediately as the most dominant Pokemon in the meta, and is also, if I see this correctly, the only Pokemon that featured on both sides in the Grand Finals matchup.
That's correct. I feel like the meta is always a moving target, and we say that sometimes it sounds like hyperbole, but Annihilate look really good into an Empoleon licky intensive meta. Maybe there are other targets as well where you could land the Rage Fist or threaten with the close combat. But then when the meta shifts and you have just this abundance, this infestation of Wigglytuff, and then you have Fortress with its sub bug typing helping to shore it up quite a bit, the Annihilate just doesn't look quite as hot as it did initially. So I agree with you. The Polito is a big surprise. I think we saw as well this particular batch of tournaments, we saw Dunebug playing Politoed also in Houston, which we will talk about later. That's also a fascinating pick to me to see that Pokemon in. But, Mudshot, Weather Ball, Ice Beam, it's got a nice toolkit there. And I wanted to give you a shout out too, because Zardy in our second place slot actually brought Cresselia. And we'll give a
Yeah.
full recap on the Pokemon that we thought were so back and which ones are not so back. I was not a big believer in Cresselia, but I mean, maybe it takes a talented trainer to drive it to second place.
I will say that it is currently on my draft for the Prague regional competition, so maybe there's more Cresselia medals in its future, but thus far, a strong start to life for Cresselia on Zardy's team. Not really in terms of overall usage, though, and that is a trend that continues throughout the various regionals that we will be talking about. Cresselia not really much of a favorite, but at least
Mhm.
one strong individual showing.
Well, I have a couple of meta trends I wanted to point out. This is going to be a really fun episode because we talk about Volt Switch Fortress, and that's probably going to be the focus of this one. But then in our follow up episode, we're going to talk about the pivot over to Bug Bite. So with Fortress in this top cut, we had 4 regular Fortress and then 6 Shadow. But there were 2 trainers that picked up the Bug Bite trend early, those being LNDs Paulinotat and LNDs Kanan, and they were both running Shadow with the Bug Bite variant. So I think that also is kind of a tip of the hat to where this meta is going to go. Something I also wanted to mention, Garavello Andre was piloting a regular Alolan Sandslash with Powder Snow. This is going to be very different than what we're going to talk about in Sevilla with Chris LB's Shadow Claw Alolan Sandslash. Also, he was the only Ludicolo in top 8 this entire season, which is insane. Ludicolo pops off in the PV Poke rankings when you're trying to team build, but it doesn't feel that practical just because water and grass is such an awkward typing, a lot of weaknesses there. And then this was actually the second top 8 of the season for Shelgon, believe it or not, because E4 St. Kalor in Houston was able to place 6th overall with the Pokemon. So there's a lot of spice here. And it's crazy when you have Desynced in a tournament, and then there's another trainer who might have a spicier team. It's hard to say.
But also desynced with his Golbat Tinkaton core, certainly still being desynced, so we
Yeah.
can't really blame him. He's also bringing the spice. Overall, I believe there's like 30 different species just in this top 16, which does go to show that, yeah, LATAM is actually giving Europe a run for their money in terms of most creative region. And a lot of newly buffed Pokemon, a lot of maybe forgotten Pokemon are being explored and still
Mhm.
finding success.
I want to make a couple more shout outs. So Desynced on his team in particular, I zoomed in on the move set. Shout out to Dracoviz. I swear, I spend so much time on Dracoviz and PV Poke these days. They're like my top 2 websites. Guzzlord was actually running Brutal Swing Dragon Claw, which is very akin to Rise's Guzzlord in Houston. We also had the Shadow Golbat with Wing Attack, Air Cutter, and Shadow Ball. There's no Poison Fang tech here. The Air Cutter is just way too valuable. And one more move set I wanted to point out was that Zardy's Florges did not have Trailblaze. It was Disarming Voice and Chilling Water. So very interesting meta reads here. And to give you a little validation here, CC, all right, I've been keeping this in my back pocket. This interview didn't air when I was in Houston or Orlando, but I wanted to tell you and all of our loyal listeners. So I had a chance to sit down with Harjeff, Zardy, and Corlash, and I asked each of them what the strongest region was for competitive Pokemon Go. You want to know what they
Oh,
said?
I would imagine Europe.
Well, of course you would. No, I'm just kidding. So Harjeff said APAC because we had 2 world champions from APAC, and that makes
That's
complete
yes.
sense. That's a really good answer, right? But I was shocked to hear that both Corlash and Zardy said EU was the strongest region in the world, stronger than LATAM, stronger than NA, stronger than anywhere else. And yeah, you made reference to the Spice Index in LATAM taking it up a few levels. Maybe the skill ceiling is still in Europe. I don't know.
So what I have to say about the European region is that if you go to the Play Pokemon leaderboards where you see the championship point rankings, there's like 16 or so Europeans with 1,000 or more championship points already, and then like a bunch of trainers who maybe just didn't go to as many events that are following close behind. So there's just a huge amount of players who go to a lot of events and always place highly. and you have like
Mm,
half a dozen of those in North America as well. But Europe just has like 2 to 3 times the amount of trainers with like a similar record, and that makes every European bracket a real gauntlet. And also like
mm.
one thing that I don't know, I'm not trying to like rain on
That's all
anyone's
right.
parade here, but like Nighttime Clasher, obviously LAIC champion, Orlando champion question mark, one of the best trainers in the world in any case. Um, Amazing season. His first 3 European regionals of the season didn't crack the top 16, and I think that just goes to show how competitive and how difficult the EU circuit is.
Have you had a chance to get out to the theater and watch Project Hail Mary?
Not yet, no.
I'll say it now. 'Cause you definitely need to watch it, especially if you're a fan of sci-fi. But you said Orlando Champion question. That sounds like one of the characters in the film. They say question or they say statement, and they're like Firestar Orlando Champion statement, right? So you'll
Yeah.
you'll appreciate the movie once you do get
Uh,
around to seeing it. But yeah, that's a really good point about NTC. I think a lot of trainers, especially in NA, look at him as being one of the cream of the crop, one of the elites. He was able to win LAIC, but that wasn't EUIC, right? So maybe there's a little discrepancy there. ZZ, before we get into grands, I just wanted to ask if there's any other teams or any other Pokemon you wanted to shout out to.
Um, I feel as if we covered all our bases. Like one
Okay.
thing that I do want to shout out is DBS Daniel SMB in fourth place, still rocking that Shadow Kanto Marowak. The Mudsteppers have essentially disappeared from the meta, and I wonder whether that is an overcorrection or whether that is just the correct play. But one of them got a fourth place medal, so maybe there's still something here.
I wonder. I do wonder. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't really experimented with Mud Slapper since the nerf. So maybe it just comes down to a question of playtime and becoming familiar. So LNDsRargef was kind enough to share with me the notes of the matchups for the grand finals. It did go all 5 games. Harjeff was able to win game 5 in the end. But shout out to our special segment. I actually have a voice clip from him, and he's going to tell us about his experience in Curitiba and his matchup against Zarddy, who I think is quickly becoming one of his greatest rivals in Brazil. So sit with us, everyone. This one's about 3 minutes, and let's hear from Harjeff.
Hi everyone, hi Jeff here. Hi Speedy, hi ZZ. Thanks a lot for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in this podcast. Like I'm a big fan of it, so I'm very happy to be here. So about the grand finals in Curitiba Regional, I was pretty happy to be in the grand finals again. Like it's a 4 time in a row that I'm in a grand final in a Brazilian regional. But the other 3 times I was the runner up. So I really want to win this time. Like it's always good to come with the title. So I knew it wasn't going to be easy because I was facing Zardy, and Zardy has like he's already like an amazing player, but he has a very unique way to team build, and I knew he had like a very unique team, a very good team, and I know that he was good with that team. So I knew wasn't going to be easy. Like we have a lot of neutral play in both sides. So I have Clodsire that has like neutral matchups against almost all of his team. Like he had Quagsire to counter it, but it was hard to bring Quagsire. Spoiler, he actually brought a lot Quagsire against me. And I also had like Wigglytuff that again very neutral matchup against a lot of things. Only one real counter Fortress, but like Fortress was hard to bring against my team. So we both had like a lot of neutral play to use in this particular matchup. But at the same time, like sometimes a decision that we make before the game start, like the team that we bring was already going to be hard to overcome, like a bad alignment or something. And again, when you're facing like a very good player, like both sides were, uh, you are never sure if your opponent is going to adapt or not adapt. Because like when you don't adapt, maybe it's already a step ahead of your opponent. Because your opponent may think, oh, now he's going to bring this particular Pokemon because he's going to counter the things that I was running. So I can adapt the adaptation or not adapt. So it's hard. There is a lot of mind games in these games. And again, a best of five. So like my strategy was a lot using like Fortress, Clodsire, Wigglytuff, and I think what helped me a lot was using Altaria in the last game. Like I had a bad lead, was Clodsire and Quagsire. So I had Clodsire on the lead, I had Wigglytuff on the safe spot. I knew that he probably not have like a good response, and he has to deal with the neutral play. That gave me some advantage, and I had energy on Clodsire, energy on Altaria, and I could like overcome like the bad lead Clodsire on the Quagsire. And again, I was very happy to be able to win. Like was very hard, and that's it. I hope I was able to help with some strategies, and I'm very open to questions in the future if someone wants to talk about these games. Like I always love to talk about the tournaments, the gameplay. I always like to think about what happened after the tournament. So I'm very happy to be able to share some things with you guys, and I hope we have some other times in the future. Thanks a lot.
Let's go. Our first ever guest interview clip. How about that, ZZ?
I love that. I hope we do more of these in the future because at the end of the day, we can speculate, but only the players who actually were there can give us the insight as to what actually happened in the grand finals. And yeah, like um, I think it's very interesting also to hear from Rajev's perspective what he thought was going to happen and what then ended up happening, where he was like, okay, I kind of have a very difficult team composition to bring the Quagsire into with like the Politoed, which you can't Aquatail, with the Altaria, which puts out a lot of pressure, and then Zardie just played a lot of Quagsire anyway. But also how he positions a safe swap behind the lead that can always give him like an advantage to in the end game still pull it out even if he leads like a Clodsire into a Quagsire. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like the Clodsire, now that he called it out, it looks so good into a lot of Zardy's team. I would imagine that the Cresselia maybe is a little better into Clodsire now than it used to be because before the Psycho Cut damage buff, that was actually not a good matchup for Cresselia at all. But between like the Florges, the Licky Licky, the Fortress, and the Guzzlord, there's a lot of Clodsire targets on Zardy's team.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, for the first time in I don't even know how long, I had to look up the Sims with Cresselia versus Clodsire, and Cresselia actually does win that. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of psycho cuts, a lot of grass knots. I'm gonna put up the full team chart here on the YouTube version, so you can look at all the team compositions that were used. But I'll just kind of breeze through this really briefly, just based on what I can see from Harjeff's notes and based on what he told us in the interview. So game one, Harjeff leads Shadow Fortress into Cresselia. I mean, obviously a fantastic lead for the Fortress. Cresselia can really do nothing here. I assume that what Zardie did was he safe swapped into Licky Licky, and then that allowed Harjeff to bring in the Clodsire. The final Pokemon were Wigglytuff for Harjeff and Quagsire for Zardie. So I assume that's how that one went. Game number two, Harjeff led Fortress into Licky Licky. Harjeff basically ran back the same team, but Zardie switched things around. This time he led Licky Licky. He had the Quagsire and the Cresselia, but just in a different order. And I assume that Zardie was able to align his Quagsire versus the Clodsire in the end to win that game. Game three, this was a crushing lead for Harjeff. This was actually Harjeff leading Wigglytuff into Guzzlord. So I guess a crushing lead for Zardie. Very, very difficult to overcome that. Harjeff wins game three. Game four, Clodsire lead into Cresselia, the two Pokemon that we kind of highlighted coming into this recap. Clodsire only wins the twos versus Cresselia. Cresselia wins the zeros and the ones. If Harjeff swapped Corsola, he probably got countered by Licky Licky. If Harjeff swapped Wigglytuff, he probably got the Shadow Quagsire. So either way, Zarddy is able to win game 4. Game 5 is the one that Harjeff talked about. He led Clodsire into Quagsire, and that pivot over to the Shadow Altaria was actually the game changer there because there's no Florges on this team of 3 from Zarddy. He brought the Quagsire, the Lickilicky, and the Cresselia, and the only hard-hitting move here, really, I guess outside of the Quagsire Stone Edge, would be the Cresselia Moonblast. And Harjeff, due to energy management and that Wiggly safe swap that he talked about, was able to overcome it. Full metrics here, I wanted to point out, Zarddy brought his Cresselia 4 out of the 5 battles in the grand finals. He brought his Shadow Quagsire every single time. And I'm so sorry, ZZ, but Harjeff did not play Politoed a single time in the grand finals.
No, this is like, but like, still, it's a gold medal nonetheless. Politoed was on the team. It's a very cheerful team member, I'd imagine. But yeah, like I guess like the show 6 pick 3 format allows you to maybe only have like 3 to 4 viable Pokemon into a matchup and still succeed. It's just about building a team of 6 that really does well into the wide variety of teams that you will face. I'm sure Politoed did something somewhere, even if it maybe was nothing in the grand finals.
They probably just cheered on the sidelines, with its arms up and its little squiggle belly.
Yeah. But that's like good info, because what if somebody just wins a tournament that wasn't streamed and didn't use the spice pick that stands out a single time? People then copy that spice pick not knowing that it didn't do anything.
Purely bench pressure. Unless it's like that Bidoof that was registered, I think in Orlando. There was a team with Bidoof on it. So basically,
yeah. It went like 4-2. Like Dracovis, so Dracovis.com recently introduced a feature that allows you to not only check for usage stats at any given event, but also you are able to filter for win rate. And because Bidoof was on one team of 6 just as a mascot, but that team went 4-2 in the event, probably without Bidoof's help. Bidoof was listed as a like 66% win rate, which is quite impressive and may inspire people to pick up Bidoof in the future.
I feel like that should be when you Google search how to lie with statistics. That should be an example.
Exactly.
Right? What a powerful Pokemon,
Oh.
That's so fascinating. Well, shout out to our trainers that competed in Curitiba. This was largely a Brazilian dominated event. The only trainer from outside of Brazil in our top 16 was Desynced. So shout out to him as well for always competing and doing his best. This is a good time to add a small addendum here. ZZ, you and I kind of talked about this. So we shouted out Jumothy as being the only trainer in history to win 2 events with the same exact team. And I got fact checked. I got reality checked real hard by our friend Desynced because he said, I did that as well. So shout out to Desynced, our first trainer to actually win twice with the same team. As I pull up the notes here, I'll tell you which events they were, and I don't have it. So I'll have to go back into our earlier
It was 2024 Buenos Aires as well as 2024 Lima. So
that's why we're a good team.
There you have it.
There we have it, chat. That's why we're a good team. Well, I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to add. 108 trainers competing in Curitiba. That is a southern city in Brazil, and in the spring as well, the second weekend of March. Probably very pretty, very, very beautiful in that part of Brazil. So with that being said, I think it's time to turn the page to Seville.
Oh yeah, that is going to be a very interesting one. Oh, hold up. Do we need to do Houston first, in fact? Because we need to. Yeah, because like Houston happened before Sevilla, right? Because I do remember team building with the Elam team in mind that ended up taking the win in Houston. And that team only really differs from Rajeff's team in that it replaced the Politoed with a Quagsire. There's also like a difference in shadow status on the Fortress that ended up on the winning team, but the overall formula is near identical, with Quagsire doing a lot of the same things that Politoed also does, with having a cheap water type stab move available, with having the mudshot pacing, with having a coverage move that helps against flying types. But the one thing that Quagsire notably has as like an upper hand over Politoed is just the ground subtyping, which is especially crucial in a meta where Volt Switch Fortress is all the rage, and on every second team essentially. So yeah, that was an adjustment that was being made, and yeah, it worked out quite well. Essentially, the exact same formula taking back-to-back regionals.
ZZ, that's such an incredible point, and I didn't connect those two dots until you just said it. So DracoViz just rolled out that incredible feature that you talked about, the win rate. They need to roll out a new feature, which is duplicate teams, because I want to look
Oh.
at the overlap between certain teams and then which trainers brought the same or nearly identical teams to events. I think that'd be really cool to look at because it's such like a wide a wide net to cast when you see six Pokemon and you're like, wait, does this six match with the other six when the Pokemon are in different orders and everything's kind of rearranged? And then there's a question of move sets too. But that's so interesting to see that Elam's team was very, very inspired by Harjeff's team. And I think that Dunebug probably gave a little shout out to Harjeff too, because he said, Elam, you forgot the Polytoad. Let me bring it real quick. And it did appear on his second place team.
Yeah, so very much like a mirror image from what we saw in Brazil the week before. Yeah, if we
Yeah.
go just through the top 16 bracket, we see a lot of very familiar names in top four, with Elam taking first, Dunebug taking second, Nighttime Clasher in third place, and Its Accent rounding out the medalists in fourth place. Like, if you were to tell me that these are the four names on your North American Play Pokemon Mount Rushmore, like, I would maybe like make a case for people like Rice and Pocket, on maybe like retired players like Madash, but these are like all valid candidates for that, and to see them just take one to fourth, just goes to show how stacked of a regional this was.
Yeah, I really appreciate. You had that in your notes too. You said basically Mount Rushmore of NA PvP, and we have a former world champion, an international champion in Clasher. You got Dunebug, a six-time winner, and then Elam in top four alone. That's insane. I want to shout out to a couple of other meta picks that we saw as well in our top cut. Mango with Umbreon bringing up the back of our top 16 there. You know what? Umbreon looked really good. I believe that Phoenix was also playing Umbreon and he won the challenge with it the day before the event. I'm actually pretty high on this Pokemon. I think Umbreon it requires a specific kind of trainer to play it. It'd be very patient. You have to throw a lot of charge moves. You have to overcharge quite a bit. It's not my style whatsoever, but it is a sick Pokemon and it's really annoying to deal with. Shout out Brandino with the Galarian Stunfisk. This was such a watching Brandino play was such an interesting combination of plays that you didn't really expect, making a lot of like switch decisions and bait calls that seemed kind of like they were out of the blue. But that combined with an unconventional team actually led to a top 16 performance, which was really, really fun to watch. It was always like, you don't know what you're going to get. You ever watch those videos like on Instagram Reels where somebody will like reach for a bottle and they'll unscrew the cap and then they'll like throw the bottle and keep the cap? We're just like subverting the expectation every turn of the way. That was what Shadow Brandino's gameplay looked like to me. We also
He did have the spiciest team of the top 16. I believe he's the only player with four Pokemon on his six that weren't part of the top 12 usage. So
wow,
certainly a very fun run to watch.
very fun. That's a good word for it there. We also had and I think oh my gosh, I'm blanking because he told me his name and we said it several times on the broadcast. I Ray. Um I always blank. I blanked during the show closing too. I couldn't remember his name. He's the Noctowl player,
Yeah,
essentially.
the one singular Noctowl player. He also has four Shadow Pokemon, so he needs
Yeah.
bulk somewhere, and the one thing that Noctowl does have is bulk. So I see how that makes sense. However, I'm a little mad. Like, happy for the guy. I wish Noctowl didn't make any top 16s, because then my prediction of Noctowl being a fraud would have been even more accurate than it is now. Um, so I will have to claim that, unfortunately, this ninth place finish with Noctowl was all down to ability and not to the owl.
Fair, fair. Yeah. So the Noctowl making an appearance. Also, two Shadow Drapians here in our top cut, but they, for all intents and purposes, were a bit of the bottom dwellers of our top cut. They did not rise up the rankings as we anticipated they would in the absence of Mudslap. Goalie Greg, very fun interview, very fun person to be around. Also played Clefable, and I believe that he's just just feet first into competitive Pokemon Go. I think he booked out all the remaining events. He's going to LA, he's going to Indianapolis, and he's going to NAIC. He's like all in on competing. So it's really cool to talk with him. And also playing Clefable is wicked cool. Let's talk about Rise's team just briefly. I want to mention the Dragon Claw, Guzzlord, as well as the Shadow Galarian Wheezing. But during the cast, it was a Shadow Shiny Galarian Wheezing, which
Oh,
is a super tongue twister.
if you have a flex like that, you do want to bring it out at any opportunity. I'm still hoping for a Dragonite buff so I can bring out my shiny Shadow Dragonite again that I once brought to NAIC back in 2024. But yeah, certainly Galarian Weezing, one of those Pokemon that have such an interesting role compression because
Mm.
not unlike Clefable that we just talked about, it is a fairy type that beats other fairy types. The one problem with Galarian Weezing often is that you want to run all three viable charge moves in
Yeah.
Brutal Swing for the pacing and anti-ghost coverage, Sludge for reliable stab damage, and Overheat to have a shot against those Corviknight that are everywhere. And also
Exactly.
obviously Fortress as well.
Of course, and I do like that Rise's team was a little bit inspired from his Merida win. He did carry over that Gorgeist Guzzlord core, the GG's core, as I like to call it. But with the meta changes, he had to change up some things as well. So as long as he could avoid having his Shadow Shiny Glare and Wheezing lined up against a ground type, he seemed to find some success. And there were a couple times, if I remember correctly, during the stream that not having Sludge Bomb on his Guzzlord kind of came back to bite him a little bit. But the Dragon Claw is a cool tech, and that's not the last time I think we'll see the Dragon Claw, Dragon Tail, Brutal Swing, Guzzlord combination.
Yeah.
Jello Too Good with Charge Bug. There we go.
At least I'm not the only person stuck on Charger Bug in the year 2026 because that Pokemon feels a little expired, but it still does stuff. Like it's one of the few electric types that actually have some bulk to it, which is really nice, especially in neutral situations. You do not have to shield every charge attack. And also, if more people switch their Quagsire moveset from Aqua Tail Stone Edge to Aqua Tail Mud Bomb, that becomes much more of a neutral matchup because you are not really threatened by a potential one-hit knockout anymore.
I'm just getting this vision, ZZ, of you standing outside the doors to the Prague regionals, and you're just handing money to whoever will register a Mud Bomb Quagsire. You're just kind of like, yeah, just go ahead and lock this in.
I have pivoted my electric type, Speedy, because I am
Oh,
off the Charger Bug. I don't know whether you saw the post on Twitter, but I hit Legend with a Shadow Ampharos, bringing it back from 2023, my Liverpool run, where I made ninth place with an Ampharos. Ampharos is back. Now that nobody is mud slapping anymore, I can just trailblaze the Quagsire and be done with ground types for the rest of my day. Honestly,
I'm
it's looking so good.
I'm calling Butters immediately. Butters needs to know this information because he is an Evros believer, and he's been a believer in you ever since that fateful tournament. So I'm really excited to see it. And speaking of Ampharos, worst nightmare is probably Andy's Shadow Steelix, which we are going to see another Steelix perform pretty well in Orlando with Sammy. But Andy looks pretty good with that Pokemon. And, I have a little soft spot in my heart ever since Seattle. Yes, I did align my Steelix into Stunfisk too many times, and that ended up resulting in my being eliminated. But Shadow Steelix is such a monster, such a menace, and it looks so cool.
I will say, I don't know whether it's non-shadow or shadow Ampharos, but one of them actually wins the one shield scenario against Steelix. So
Get out of
it's
here.
it's kind of crazy, really. But yeah, very very strong run. Probably a career best finish for Andy as well. And one
Hmm.
of the Pokemon also featured not only on his team but also later on Nighttime Clash's team in third place is the Medicham, which is another one of those Pokemon where we were like on slightly different pages as to how back it would be eventually. You were a big Medicham believer, and I was a cautious Medicham believer. I will say you were more right than I was, because Medicham, seventh most used Pokemon in Houston Top Cut, also will be an event winner in Sevilla, just to spoil that a little bit already. But yeah, certainly a very strong neutral pick that also has the additional benefit of taking a shield from Wigglytuff in the zero shield scenario, just because of its amazing pacing to Dynamic Punch and its bulk that allows it to take all the charms plus a charge attack, um, while reaching for that second charge attack itself.
Well, ZZ, it's not often that I get a meta call over the reverse engineer. So I'm savoring this moment. I'm taking a this is a Kodak moment for me. I'm absolutely going to enjoy this one. But I yeah, a broken clock is still right twice a day. So I will say I will say this. A couple more meta trends I wanted to call out. This is Cloudsire's second event win this season. The first, as you pointed out to so expertly, is LNDsRargef in Curitiba. Curdy Wordy would win with Clodsire the following weekend in Cape Town, South Africa, which we will talk about eventually as well. Shadow Steelix, Andy, fifth place overall. This is the 11th top cut for the Pokemon. It's won two other events, being Birmingham, piloted by Maxi, and Buenos Aires, piloted by LNDS Oreo. It was also the runner-up in Belo Horizonte with, you guessed it, Harjeff. Final note I have is about Togekiss. This is its fourth place finish with its Axon. It has had three second place finishes this season. Frankfurt with 9 Alfie 2 being the first one. And then the same trainer actually piloting it to two second place finishes, that being Patoman at LAIC as well as
Oh,
Sevilla. Sevilla
that's
as well.
fun to have that Pokemon succeed both in a limited meta as well as in the open format. So
Right?
that is interesting. One question, Speedy, was your like the Steelix titles that you listed, was that just from this season or was it like career titles?
No, just from this season.
Oh, okay. Because otherwise, like, I'm pretty sure I remember Beelzebub winning worlds with it, so it has been a very strong Pokemon for a while. But yeah, still very much like I hope that they bring back Shadow Onyx to Grunts later this month, because April 30th is actually when we get our next Rocket Takeover event, which will last for 5 days, so going into May, which will allow competitors to pick up and TM away frustration from the coveted Shadow Pokemon. But Shadow Onyx not been available for a while. Now, would if they bring it back, it would even be available in its shiny form, because if they had their regular shiny released in the wild, Shadow Pokemon can always now also be shiny from grunts. So this could eventually be an opportunity for us to receive shiny Shadow Steelix if Niantic/Scopely allows us to get that Onyx back in grunts.
Imagine how badass that would be. Just the gold and purple with the flames.
Yeah,
Oh my god,
yeah.
come
Like
on.
just imagine that on screen. Like I don't
Come on.
really like how Steelix plays, but I may be intrigued if I get a shiny Shadow.
It's fun to watch though. It's fun to watch people just crunch and destroy things with it. So yeah, I agree. I've got a red phone here. It's not going to be on camera because it's top secret, but I'll tell you about it verbally. It's called the Niantic/Scopely hotline. And after this episode, I'm going to pick up that phone. I'm going to say Shadow Onyx and Rockets ASAP. Right?
Please.
We need it. We need it real bad.
Mm.
What an incredible set of Pokemon, though. And you're right, definitely a Mount Rushmore of NA trainers. I'm not sure if there are any other bracket runs or teams that we want to look at, but I am ready to discuss our grand finals.
I do have my notes ready as well. So why don't you take the lead, Speedy, and I will weigh in with whatever I have to yap about.
All right, let's do it. So, Elam jumps out to an early lead here in games 1 and 2. Dunebug trying to invert the Harjeff strategy, actually leading Politoed in game number 1, whereas Harjeff did not play it at all in Curitiba, but he leads it into Fortress, and things do not go well from there because Elam has this really cute Pokemon called Wigglytuff, and Dunebug has this really menacing Pokemon called Guzzlord, which absolutely folds like a wet paper towel when it does see the Wigglytuff. Game 2, Elam is able to lead his Galarian Corsola into Corviknight. Lots of neutral play here, but I think the backbreaker was the Wigglytuff winning the cap tie over Gourgeist and then the Icy Wind KOing it. And then the Clodsire, we had a little scared there at the end because Clodsire had to poison sting down the Politoed. But as I said during the cast, right, it's nearly impossible to 3-0 somebody like Dunebug 97, and Dunebug brings it right back. I'm not sure if there are any notes you have on the first two games, or if we should go right into the comeback.
There's two fun facts that I do want to bring up just now, because I think it lends itself to both the first game and the second game. Where in game 1, there's actually a situation where um, Dune is not switch locked. Just brings in his Guzzlord as a regular decision into the next Pokemon. But Elam still doesn't concede the farm down, but just pivots into the Wigglytuff, despite like the Guzzlord Wigglytuff matchup actually like being one that you would maybe just like stay in for to secure alignment. But I believe that was the right call by Elam for two reasons. The first reason, obviously, being that if Guzzlord gets an energy head start, it can actually make things pretty uncomfortable even for a Wigglytuff. And also, Wigglytuff is just Elam's most neutral Pokemon here. You think of it as a polarizing force, but there's no Fortress on Dunebug's team. There is no Clodsire on Dunebug's team. There's no Empoleon on Dunebug's team. The only Steel type there is the Corviknight, which like the zero shield matchup is so very close, and in some scenarios, Wiggly is even able to just put up a shield at the right time and take that matchup if it wants to. So even the hardest punish would just be a very soft loss at best.
Mm-hmm.
So just like deciding to save the Pokemon that just won the lead and bringing in the Wigglytuff into whatever is a very safe play for Elam in any scenario. And then the Wigglytuff versus Gourgeist charge attack priority that you mentioned in game two, that actually is, first of all, obviously IV dependent. So if your
Yeah.
attack stat on your Gourgeist or Wigglytuff is a little higher, that may favor you. But just um, if we compare the rank ones of the respective Pokemon, Wigglytuff wins charge attack priority over the large and the supersized Gourgeist, but would lose charge attack priority against the average and the small sized Gourgeist. So if people tell you size doesn't matter, they're likely not talking about the Gourgeist Wigglytuff matchup.
So that's what that means. They're talking about that specific matchup. Oh, okay, okay.
Probably.
Well, that makes me feel better about the conversations I've had in my life. But no, that's actually fascinating, and I've actually thought about that too. Like, should a guide be made on which gore guys you should play and the differences in the stats? And because the meta is so ever changing and so evolving constantly, it feels like it's hard to kind of posit all the forms of gore guys versus the current meta, because then it just changes in 3 months, and then you're like, oh well, I'm not worried about this cap tie because this Pokemon is no longer in the meta. So definitely an interesting discussion to be had. Um, but yeah, great analysis there. I really like the point that you brought up about game one. I think during the cast, I even said that Elam picked up that Doonbug was ABA weak to the Fortress. And he was. He had the Corviknight in the back, so
Yeah.
there was a reason for Elam to bail it out. But yeah, there were a lot of like switches in the mid game there. And you're right. He kind of tossed out the Wigglytuff, and he said, "Well, worst case, it's a Corviknight, and I just icy win the heck out of it." That's what he did.
Yeah.
So well, nobody sweeps the Dunebug, and in game three, Dunebug begins his comeback. So Dunebug leads his Licky Licky into Elam's Wigglytuff. Dunebug lets his Licky Licky go. He comes in with a Politoed, but he's still forced to throw a Weather Ball. So things are not great for Dunebug at this point. Elam sends out his Galarian Corsola into the Politoed instead of the Altaria because the Politoed had some energy up. It could have reached the Ice Beam. The real pivot point here for me was that Dune catches the Nightshade onto his Guzzlord and then essentially forces a dragon versus dragon matchup when Elam finally brings out the Altaria. Elam knows he can't fast move down, but he tries anyway. And then Guzzlord eventually sludge bombs the Altaria to win game three and keep Dunebug in the series. Game four, we have Fortress from Elam leading into Guzzlord. This was, I think, the first appearance of the Alola Ninetales for Dunebug, and it was quite good for him here. Elam insta swaps into Wigglytuff. Dunebug goes Corviknight, like you said, the only charm resist on his team, truly. And then Fortress kind of useless in this game because Dunebug has his Guzzlord, he has the Alola Ninetales and the Corviknight, and it just doesn't feel like Fortress's energy goes anywhere. And the Clodsire really struggles against the combined ice pressure from the Ninetales and the sand attacks from the Corviknight.
Yeah, that was just like a really good line call by June. In the late game, he even calls a Sand Tomb bait. Probably the only loose condition in that position would have been to shield the Sand Tomb and then let the next
Mm-hmm.
move go once you're debuffed. But yeah, overall, just like if Dune has a lead like that, he doesn't let it go. So it does come down to the decisive game five, at least in this set. It could have gone on longer if Dune took the last one, but in this one, Elam is ruthless and doubles down on leading Fortress, and this time he does find the Alola Ninetales. Um, And yeah, he does have the fortress protected really well with a Galarian Corsola in the back. So he does have an answer for the Gourgeist that eventually comes in. And the nice thing about a Corsola into Gourgeist, if the lead was in Alolan Ninetales, is that you can safely invest shields to secure that matchup because you know that if you come out with a Power Gem, the Ice type Alolan Ninetales will not love to take that either. Um, and yeah, like if Elam led his fortress into a Guzzlord, that would have been rough because you can't really swap out of that negative matchup with a Corsola in the
Mm,
back. But Gus isn't on Dune's team here. So yeah, in the end game, I think he tries to knock out the Corsola with a Weather Ball from his Alolan Ninetales, but it barely
correct.
doesn't do that. And yeah, he then ends up having Iliki in the back that cannot possibly 1v2 against a full out Wigglytuff and a Fortress. So overall, just a very comfortable final game victory by Elam, who secures his third ever regional title.
A cool nuanced moment here. If I had to pick out one specific moment, was the lead situation because Elam leads the fortress. He throws the volt switch, but Doonbug also immediately pivots and he goes into the Gourgeist. And it's so fun because the fortress's volt switch is 4 turns, and then the Gourgeist's incinerate is 5 turns, and damage does not apply until the final turn. So you see this Gourgeist come in, and you're like, holy crap, Elam, you got to get your fortress out of there or it's going to get burned to a crisp. But because it took 1 turn to switch out, that means that the 5 turns stacked on top of that means that the incinerate did not register till turn 6. So Elam's actually able to transfer over that damage from the incinerate into his Galarian Corsola, and then he's just set up from there. So it's one of those nuanced things where I feel like trainers like you and I will see that and be like, okay, yeah, that's obviously what happened. That makes sense. But I feel like for a lot of viewers who might not be as familiar with it, it's fascinating to see because that would have been double super effective damage and a ton
Yeah.
of difference. But something that Elam started doing, I don't know if you saw this, ZZ, but I watched the player's body language. I think it's great for storytelling. You can draw a lot from how they position themselves on stage. Elam added this like neck crack into his repertoire, and he's like,
Uh,
cracking the neck, and he's like, so locked in. And you're exactly right. That final game, I think he got a solid pop before he started that because there was just no turning back once that game started.
yeah, you got to work on your body language, if only to intimidate your opponent so they know what's up. So yeah, certainly one of the nuances that you need to excel on the big stage. And
Yeah.
well, if anyone can do it, it's Elam. And one fun fact that or like it's not really a fact, just like a fun observation was also that both Drapion and Medicham are back in the meta. But Elam didn't use Drapion, even though he used to be the Drapion guy in the Azumarill Drapion meta. And Axon didn't use Medicham, even though he used to be the Medicham guy. I don't know what's up, but I hope that they will not entirely abandon their old favorites because both of them appear to be relatively viable again.
I hope not. I think that Axton's probably considering it. I'm not sure if he's going to compete in LA or if he's going to go to Indianapolis. I assume he'll play at NAIC, but that'll, as we know now, will be a limited format. So
That is
yeah,
true.
there's still a couple chances for him to play his favorite Medicham. Maybe he'll bring it back. Also, random side note, but I saw a short from Play Pokemon. It had something like 28,000 views, which is pretty nice for a Pokemon Go short. But basically, it was an interview with Axon, and the question was, how do you win a mirror match consistently? And of course, this was a fantastic opportunity for him to talk about his Medi Slayer, which is like the Axon special. So that was really fun.
That's nice. Yeah, that was
Um,
legendary. I wonder whether there's like Psycho Cut bullet points as well, but I haven't found any just yet.
well, I'm sure he's looked too, so maybe the champ knows what's up. I think that's all I have for Houston. I had a fun time with this event. We did some pretty fun skits. We played cornhole. We did the space tinfoil hat segment too. I'm not sure if you saw that.
I
Um,
believe I saw it. Oh man.
but
Yeah, it was like
it's
it's Houston, right? Like you have to come up with like segments that relate to the city that you're in to some degree. So
exactly
and
exactly, and it
now
was it
like
was. Go ahead.
with the recent news from outer space, like it's becoming popular again, just like astronaut lifestyle.
Yeah. flat earthers in shambles right now. But yeah, it was funny because it was very organic. The production team actually did not know that they could cycle the lights through different colors like that in the lounge. And I was telling him like, yeah, we should turn down the lights. We should have our phones in our laps so it's like a low light, so it's like spooky time. And they said, actually, let's try this. And they cycled through the settings on those big show lights, and they're able to get not only pulsing intensity but also colors. So it gave us this real like we're in a UFO kind of feeling, which was really cool. That was one of my favorite segments I've done in a while. Um, but yeah, also I had Man in the Planet and Moonius to do it.
That was such a good selection. I didn't even know Munoz before this, but
And
fantastic that they decided to come out to this exact regional.
I was trying to get Flying Pizza to join, but he was unable to because he
Uh,
he arrived late. And then maybe I'll pull up a clip of it here if I can do this in the editing. But when I did the introductions, Rise to Occasion says, "Hi everyone, I'm Rise, Earth, Milky Way."
Over the years, our Pokemon adventures have taken us to wonderful places, but this weekend, we're in Space City. I brought three incredible trainers here with me today, three Pokemon experts, I would venture to say, and they're going to help us unravel some of the mysteries of the Pokedex. If you can introduce yourself one by one.
I'm Man in the Planet.
My name is Munius.
Rise to Occasion from Earth Milky Way.
He's so funny,
Oh,
man. He's
man.
so funny. All right. Well, that's all I have to say on Houston. Cheers as well to my co-caster, House Stark. He only does like one event per season, but we always have a really fun time. I think he's a great guy. So 158 trainers in Houston, but it's time to turn the page. ZZ, we're going to Sevilla.
Oh yes, I went to Sevilla and I did not regret it. I ended up placing seventh overall, and that is like a respectable placement. But I feel as if, like, even though I personally, as a player, didn't do better than good, I didn't do amazingly, just good. At least my swine did, because the Piloswine was kind of the talk of the town in Sevilla, where out of the top 16, four trainers actually had this Pokemon that was never before like viewed as a serious competitive option on their team, including both grand finalists. And those were Paulasha 97 and Pataman, obviously two of the best trainers in Europe, two of the best trainers in the world, both
Mhm.
trusting the Piloswine. So at least I have that meta read that I can still be like kind of rooting for that has gone further than I did myself. And I thought it was such a good idea, right? Because if you look at the team that just won Houston, the Ilum team,
Mhm.
in the two shield scenario, there is actually not a Pokemon that beats Piloswine. You would imagine that Quagsire is a proper answer, but a high rank
Yeah.
Piloswine is actually able to survive an Aqua Tail and eventually take out with Powder Snows and an Icicle Spear. And if you safe swap your Piloswine and you land an Icicle Spear before the counter swapping Quagsire is able to land an Aqua Tail of its own, you will actually be able to two shield farm down with Powder Snows if you hit a breakpoint that is fairly easy to hit into a Quagsire. So the premier water type of that time wasn't actually a reliable check to Piloswine, and that left it with nearly no enemies, especially in a Volt Switch Fortress meta.
I'm telling you, where else? I'm genuinely asking our listeners, where else are you going to get insights like this, right? The Show 6 podcast is rocking, and a huge part of that is our co-host here, Z Wireless. ZZ, I really liked your post. You kind of alluded to this in your introduction to Sevilla. But just on a personal note, I really kind of took the final sentence home. So I'll throw up the post here. This was on March 29th. ZZ says, pretty quiet season for me, but still 3 events to go before Worlds, and not a lot missing for a return to form. And that's very exciting for me to hear. Like you said, top 8, but you kind of left a couple of things on the table, maybe still making a few adjustments. But that's really exciting to hear that you feel like you're coming back into it. So I'm rooting for you. Question though, ZZ, let's be honest. you said the Piloswine was a great meta read just because it wins a lot of shield scenarios, but who the hell is also thinking of Piloswine if it's not in Europe? Again, I'm convinced that there's like a pact and you all get together in this massive Discord server and you say, okay, what are we going to do this time? And sometimes it's something totally bonkers. Sometimes it's Piloswine. I don't know what's going on. How did so many trainers arrive at this conclusion?
So I actually know the origin story of all those Piloswine. Um, Pablondina's Piloswine, 13th place. It's a Shadow Piloswine, but you will see some similarities to the team that I've been rocking with the Charjabug present, with the Azumarill present, the Corviknight, the Medicham. This is like fairly similar, and I believe the reason for that was that I actually played against Pablo in one of the Candle Cult practice tournaments where I tried out my swine and had multiple very successful bracket runs there. And yeah, like we faced, and the next time I see him in the tournament, he also has the Piloswine. That was actually something that a couple competitors were really interested in after facing me. Goji from Korea also brought it to a couple of practices after we competed against each other. So that is like one way of the Piloswine spreading, just people battling me in practice and like seeing that this thing is actually a real menace if you don't have like a clear way of dealing with it. Um, the next Piloswine to highlight is actually the Patoswine, the second place Icicle Spear Stone Edge Shadow Piloswine from Patoman. And you see the differences, right? Like this is a different moveset, this is a Shadow, this is not quite like my Swine, and the team around it also looks fairly different still. And that is because Pato actually told me in Sevilla that he was like a little not like mad, but like a little nervous after he saw me bringing all those Piloswines to practice because he had cooked up the Piloswine team like 2 weeks prior, and then everybody was like all of a sudden aware of that Pokemon existing, and he was like, "Oh no, is my secret tech being found out here?" But I would imagine that like he'll still be happy with a second place finish, even though I will say that this is the third time he competed in Spain, and it's been runner up every time.
Ooh.
I think that this is probably like the highest thing, like maybe next to winning worlds on his list to finally take first place in his home country. But still, obviously, another very impressive showing by Patoman. And finally, the victorious swine, the Paulaswine, where Palasha did actually a very sweet shout out during the event that I didn't ask for, and I don't know whether I entirely deserve it because I think this Piloswine was made shine by the team construction around it. But yeah, she did mention that the origin story of her Piloswine is that she queued into me running Piloswine in GBL and got the idea from there. So I am responsible for 3 of the 4 Piloswine in Top Gun by one like way or another. But obviously, I believe that what actually made the difference for Paula and not for the other people running the swine is that she found the perfect partner to it in the in the non-shadow Feraligatr rather, which was probably the breakout pick from that weekend, even though it only featured on one team and not on 4. Probably like on 2 teams actually, because Vitality also had it in the top 16. And also, I do want to mention San Kaylor bringing it to Houston, I believe, was where he took 5th place with it, which was like a little preview as to what was to come with the non-shadow for Alligator, which ever since Paula's victory has risen to become a meta staple again.
I think it's so ironic how Piloswine was the star of the show in Sevilla, and then a lot of the Americans looked at it and they said, "I'm not playing the pig, but the gator. I'll play the gator." And we saw lots and lots of gator in Orlando. In real life, wild boars are often an invasive species, and they come into an environment and they multiply and they become a problem, and they dig up roots and destroy gardens, and they're kind of a menace, right? So interesting that you kind of proliferated this Piloswine breakout, right?
And then you go to Florida and they're just bringing out their gators. I see how it makes sense now.
Exactly, exactly. It all comes down to the environment. So, wow, that's really interesting, and that's honestly a better answer than I expected. So I'm happy to hear it. And again, I respect the spice in Europe so much. It's one of those things where I didn't think anyone was going to play this Pokemon. It's like if some for some reason everybody just picked up Kecleon and started playing Kecleon, I'd be like, what the hell is happening? But that's EU for you. A couple other things I wanted to shout out here. We had a great run by Andres. I think she had some quality wins, Shadow Fortress and Shadow Quagsire. Also with Malamar on the team. Malamar is another Pokemon that's kind of popped up here and there. I think it's got some versatility and some viability, but probably a lot less now that Bug Bite Fortress seems to be the standard. Mark Starr with Shadow Kanto Ninetales. This is something that Arrow also brought over to Orlando. I don't know if I see the vision with the Ninetales. It's fun, but it just doesn't seem like a Pokemon that's, in my mind, super reasonable. And I wanted to shout out to Stone Collection and Joninio 17 in particular, because on my caster predicts for Orlando, I had Talonflame circled, even double or triple outlined as a Pokemon that I thought was going to be a big impact player. I mean, if you want to beat the Annihilapes, the Metachams, the Wigglytuffs, the Corbinites, the Gorgeist, the Piloswine, probably the Fortress, if you want to beat all those Pokemon, you got to bring Talonflame. And I think that Stone and Joninio probably saw the vision, but it didn't work quite as well. And I think a large part of that is due to the fact that every single team, it feels like, has some kind of water, and it's mostly Quagsire.
Yeah, there's like actually a couple of interesting considerations towards all of those Pokemon that you just mentioned. For Andres Malamar, she chose the non-shadow version of Malamar, and that is actually a Pokemon that does want a slightly elevated attack stat compared to what the rank 1 would be to get a breakpoint into Shadow Quagsire, which at like almost 69% here is probably one of the most common matchups that it will face. And that will
Nice.
actually take the matchup from soft losing to a fairly convincing win. Um, then there is the question of what kind of Talonflame do I want to bring? Do I want to bring the non-shadow version, or do I want to bring the shadow version that used to be more popular in recent months? And I believe that Juninho's decision to bring the non-shadow Talonflame in this environment does actually make quite a lot of sense, because against the non-shadow, Quagsire does need to land the Stone Edge to properly knock it out, meaning that you can take an Aqua Tail and hang on and not get much shot down, and instead threaten a knockout with Brave Bird or maybe Fly if the Quagsire is slightly weakened. So that is something to keep in mind, where the Shadow instead adds 2 shield wins over the likes of Empoleon or Credilli, which are not as common in the meta anymore.
Mm.
Okay, the reason why Kanto Ninetales is interesting is the Community Day move Energy Ball, which with a slight energy head start and also in the Zero Shield scenario does give it an out against the Quagsire. And what else? Still like the last thing that I want to talk about. It's just like more
Doublade?
stuff that I can talk about. Yeah. There's like teams and players that we haven't yet mentioned. Dianoski in 5th place with Doublade, which is one of the blades of all time, a very versatile Pokemon, but also it can feel slightly fraudulent due to the non-stab damage from its Sacred Sword, as well as
Correct.
it's like it's like a little bit awkward with Gyro Ball as a coverage move not being particularly strong. But yeah, it is flexible and it can be a very painful core breaker to deal with. And yeah, Dianoski obviously leveraging that really well with the 5th place finish. And my probably favorite non-Piloswine spice pick of the event is Chris LB's Shadow Claw Alolan Sandslash. Chris LB is the person that knocked me out of the tournament, and that is in part because of the pressure that Sandslash is putting on even a Medicham that was on my
Mm.
team. Because if you are the Medicham into the Sandslash in the 2 shield scenario, you are just not winning that matchup. You're barely damaging the Sandslash at all, because unless you bait successfully with 2 Ice Punches, you will not reach 3 Dynamic Punches, and therefore you will just feign to Shadow Claws and an Ice Punch connecting, which is very like ironic for Alolan Sandslash to be a Medicham counter in the year 2026, but that is actually what happens if the Medi doesn't get the double bait in the two shell scenario. So a lot of
Yeah.
innovation, a lot of unusual picks succeeding in the EU circuit as we've come to expect by this point.
I really appreciate that you mentioned Dinoski's Doublade and Chris LB's Shadow Claw Alolan Sandslash, because that was the real backbreaker that I saw for the former pick. Doublade was that matchup between those two players, because I remember Dinoski, I think it was game 2, maybe it was game 3, switches in the Doublade into the Sandslash and tries to win the twos versus the Sandslash and just fails. And I'm like, yeah, I think that this is the point of no return where Dinoski was going to fall to Chris, and he eventually did. Very fascinating team here from Chris LB, the Florges, the Licky Licky, the Shadow Malamar, as well as the Shadow Quagsire and the Corviknight. Very fun team to watch play, and it's cathartic for me too, because I've said before that Ice looks like a really good typing, and Inadequance brought out the Alola Ninetales, won an event with that. We've seen Alola Ninetales take second place multiple times this season as well. But my pick back in the day was the Sandslash. And at that point, there was just too much Stunfisk. There was a lot of Quagsire at that point, too. It just felt like there were too many obstacles. But I feel like Chris picked the perfect moment to bring this Pokemon. As we work into our top 3, I wanted to shout out to Strange TOP, or Strange Top, as he's also known. Best career finish ever in the championship series. Previous best finishes for Strange Top were 9th in Stuttgart, or basically top 12 in Stuttgart this season. He was also top 12 in Utrecht and Stockholm last season. So Strange TOP really coming into his own, and that's off the heels of an incredible performance in Spain.
Yeah, like massive upwards trajectory, and also just like the top 4 players all being from Spain is just like a testament to that country just really having such a strong position within the European scene. And if you look at the championship leaderboards, out of the top 5 players in Europe, 3 of them are Spanish. So it's honestly like how the video game feels about their Italians, where like this is almost a region of its own with how many top players are just from that one country. And for Pokemon Go, it appears to be the Spanish.
ZZ, it's been a month since we recorded, and that was the exact analogy that I was going to make. Because you said before what the wolf is to VG, the duck is to go. I was going to say what Italy is to VG, Spain is to go. Right? All right. The wavelengths here are crazy.
I see we're on the same page.
I wanted to mention one more fun fact about Chris, 4th place overall. So he actually fell to fellow Spaniard Andres in round 3, and he ended up winning 7 rounds in a row before he was knocked out by Potoman. So that's an incredibly fortuitous run by him as well, to actually push himself that far. 7 rounds in the loser side bracket is not easy. And then falling, of course, to the Spanish goat prodigy, Potaman, is also nothing to shake your finger at. So I guess we could jump into grand finals here. I want to preface this by saying that Paula pulled off something that basically no one else is able to do, and that's 3-0 sweep Potaman. Basically, no one can do this. It's very, very rare to beat him this handedly, and she's only the 3rd trainer in the grand finals this season to win via 3-0. The other 2 were LNDsRargef versus Spartan L17 in Monterrey. Harjef was able to win that 3-0. And then we had Inadequance versus Colin in Stuttgart, where Inadequance won 3-0. Paula is the 3rd trainer to do it this entire season. And we've had a ton of bracket resets in the grand finals. I'm going to get my notes together here once I add in Orlando. But from what I can see, ZZ, it's insane. But in terms of games won this season, we actually have more games in the grand finals being won by the loser side trainers than we do from the winner's side trainers, which
that is
it's not by a small margin. It's like by 13 or 15 games. It's a lot.
Like I see how like there's room to win for the loser side more, because like, sure. Okay, on the winner's side, you get to take more risks because you're not immediately losing the tournament off the back of one negative series. But yeah, I did not know that. That does feel like an outstanding stat, and it also feels like something that makes for really good television. So You've truly been blessed
Exactly.
this year when it comes to just like the excitement building towards the crowning moments of an event. Not as much in
Yeah.
Seville because Paulasha was just too dominant. I will say, I once 3-0'd Patoman in the bracket reset of EUIC 2025. Did
I
I still
remember.
lose the tournament? Yes. Did it
I
help me to
remember.
go 3-0? No. But I once upon a time, Ankh was not washed.
Well,
But
I know what you're getting at. If you were on the winner's side, it would have been over, right? But yeah, no, I don't think you're washed easy. I think you're
uh,
just coming into a resurgence.
you
Something I
just
wanted
gotta time
to.
your wins well, right? You just gotta time your wins well.
I've said this before during the cast, and it's not hyperbole. I do feel like the best trainers peak at the right times, right? You don't want to peak early in the season and then fall off, and then by the time Worlds comes around, you're just not in top form. But if you have kind of a mid-season and then you're suddenly everything's clicking for you leading up to Worlds, and you really are on fire, that's the best time to peak, right? If you're going into the biggest competition of the year. So I think that's your strategy, and you're just not telling everyone because you're too modest. All right. Um, but we can go ahead and jump into the grand finals here. This was a quick one, as we've talked about a couple times. And I think it started in game one, and I have in my notes here. So Paula led Metacham and Pato led Fortress. Pato also had Shadow Piloswine in the back. So my note says Pato is ABA weak to Metacham, and then in all caps, yikes. This is a not great position to be in. Pato absorbs the dynamic punch, pivots over to Shadow Quagsire. Pato reveals his Piloswine. He only gets one Powder Snow. Paula sends out her own Piloswine, and because of that Shadow versus regular dynamic, she's able to outlast Pataman in game number one. That was my read on it, at least.
Yeah, like honestly, once Potter was caught ABA weak to Metagem, it was really tough to come back from this because if you look at his team, Fortress, Piloswine, Quagsire, that is a strategy that banks on drawing out the Feraligatr to then sweep with your third Pokemon. But you can't really draw something out if your back Pokemon is also weak to the lead. So
Correct.
that was really just like very unfortunate for Pato to be caught ABA week like that. And yeah, I was like a little bit surprised because when I just looked at the matchups on paper, I was expecting Pato to bring Togekiss every game. Because
Mm,
if you look against Paula's team, obviously she can, as she later will in game three actually, just
yeah.
invest 2 shields into Piloswine and farm through a Togekiss. That is an option. But on the safe swap, what is really stopping the Togekiss from being a real problem for her? So I was like kind of surprised to not see even more Togekiss action from Pato, but I guess
Mhm.
like he may not have been super trusting towards whether he wins charge attack priority against the Feraligatr, which is also an open question. Like that's an IV dependent matchup. Um, and yeah, Paula also like honestly, even the Metachamp isn't that bad into Togekiss just because you do hang on to one Psyshock and you will reach 2 Ice Punches before the Togekiss will reach 2 charge attacks. So I guess it wouldn't have been like an easy matchup. It would always have been an uphill climb for Pato,
Mm.
but he did not rely on that Togekiss, especially in those early games, which surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, surprises me too. I agree with your sentiment there. The Togekiss energy just looks like it goes everywhere. I mean, I guess you do have some matchups that are awkward. The Metachan matchup, you have to rely on Peck. Psyshock is only neutral. But elsewhere, it looks like it's got a ton of play with the fast and charge attacks. At least some way or somehow you're dealing super effective or at least neutral at the worst. You're never in a really awful position unless you're shields down versus a Piloswine. Then it really gets bad. Game number two, we got Piloswine versus Shadow Piloswine lead. Paula insta swaps into her Feraligatr. Pato sends out his Fortress, but Pato gives up control of switch advantage. The Feraligatr just overpowers it. The key moment for game number two, in my mind, was Paula calling the air cutter. And then she's able to double up on the icicle spears. And when she gets off both of those charge attacks near the end of the game, that's just curtains. There's nothing Pato can really do.
Yeah, that was a really nice health range for the Piloswine to be in to just survive that double up and then just have too much energy. And yeah, I think there was also a moment in the mid game where like Pato didn't fight for switch advantage, but then still had to give up a shield because his Alolan Ninetales wasn't able to handle the Feraligatr in time, wasn't able to farm down, had to invest a shield to protect from a Hydro Cannon, and that essentially left him without the shield advantage that he did initially secure in the middle matchup, allowing Paula to just have the favorable alignment and then just also a fairly unchecked Piloswine that was too much for Pato to really deal with.
Yeah.
And then game 3, Pato is done getting Medichammed, is what is in my notes, because he leads the Corsola, he has the Togekiss in the back, and somehow he still doesn't get the Medicham where he wants it to. Like,
Yeah.
that was really unfortunate. But like, I think the Corsola lead is a fair gamble because Pato has been bringing the Corviknight and the Fortress a fair amount, which would scare away Paula's Wigglytuff, which is really the only bad matchup for Corsola. But still, like, at the end of the day, the Medicham on Paula's side does find the Fortress on Pato's side.
Yeah.
There's a Feraligatr on the Corsola, which like it's not a hard counter. The one shield scenario is actually favorable for the Corsola, but it's still not where you want to be. The end game is both players have saved their shields. Pato saved them for a Togekiss, Paula saved them for a Piloswine, and the Powder Snows, they are just enough to finish this game for Paula and secure her third ever title.
This was a really fun cast to listen to because in particular Gaines was like losing his mind, and he tossed in a bunch of the like yippies and whoa,
Yes.
all these like weird vocalizations that he does.
Yeah. I remember like old school game streams. Like I don't watch Twitch as much anymore as I used to. I'm sorry to all the creators. I still love you. I just don't have the time anymore. But like game streams used to be like he used to be so into Primeape back in the day when that one didn't even have Rage Fist. He was just like, oh, just Primeape, go! What a good swine monkey boy. And like Piloswine, like it kind of has like the Primeape nose. It's like akin to Primeape. It's like less of a monkey, but it's like still Primeape is still half a swine. And I think there were like memories being brought up from like the goofy Pokemon that Gaines liked to celebrate on the stream back in the day. And yeah, when it was Piloswine into Piloswine, he just lost it. And I was like, I love the energy. Like this is how excited you are supposed to get when there's two Piloswine on the screen. What else can I tell you?
Yeah, that exact moment is what came to mind for me. He's like, and in game 2, we have Piloswine into Shadow Piloswine. Whoa! Just like crazy vocalization. And he was getting into it. I really appreciate that. The excitement is so genuine. It's so good. Well, shout out to all of our incredible casting team for that event, and shout out to Paula as well. Very emotional win for her, as we kind of alluded to. She made a couple of references during the stream to some real life things that have been impacting her and kind of adding up over time. So this win had to feel extremely cathartic for her, especially a trainer who I think this whole season has seen a lot of ups and downs, and mostly downs, right? Doesn't feel like she's performing at the level that she is capable of. So for her to come in and reestablish her title, take back the crown of the Queen of PvP, that was really, really fun to watch. So shout out to Paula.
Yeah.
What a performance.
Yeah, Paula's been on an upward trajectory for a while already. I think like the EUIC 9th place finish was already like a sign that this was trending into the right direction again. And following that up with a victory on home soil, it's just, I can only imagine how good that must feel, especially after her last tournament victory was actually from the 2024 season in Stockholm. So that was almost 2 years ago. Yeah, you wouldn't think it was like that far back because Paula was still consistently just racking up good results across international as well as national competitions. But like sometimes you just have to be persistent and you will have your moment again. So yeah, very, very happy for her. Very happy that she represented EU so well with such a spicy team, and was certainly like Paula is somebody who is easy to root for because she also shows emotions on stage. Also doesn't get disqualified for them, which is also something that's really important. Um, but yeah, overall, I know this is like a slightly derailing comment, but I am sincere when
Pause.
I say that I was very happy to see her take the title, and it also does set up the next year um, narrative of, oh, can Pato break the runner-up curse? Because this one, it
Mm.
almost feels cursed for probably the world's best trainer to come second place 3 times in a row in his home country.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's good enough for Pato. You know, his standards are extremely high given his competitive success, as they should be. Also, yeah, didn't mean to leave you hanging there, Z. I was just laughing so much that I didn't want to have my chuckles pick up on the audio. But yes,
I didn't
very
even
good point.
I didn't even plan for it to come across this way, but
Hey,
like it's
you
difficult
know.
to verbalize that and then not think of the incident
Oh
that we
yeah.
will talk about in our next episode. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, this was
I
Seville.
just,
Seville was a fun one. Um,
you know
the
what?
world was still all right back in Seville.
I mean, back in the day, right? The nostalgia is kicking in already. I almost feel like every trainer in Prague needs to bring a pillow and a blanket in order to tuck their headset in after the game is over. So maybe we'll see that. I really hope we get something.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, and let's keep
Mhm.
the flowers where they belong. That's in the hands of Paula, Elam, and Harjef, our three winners from this episode's recaps. Also, very poetic that Elam won his third title and Paula won her third title. Is that right?
And Rajif won his sixth title, so it's like
Okay, yeah, he doubled up.
multiples of three is kind of the theme. And given that this was a triple header episode, what else could be more fitting?
Exactly. I really like the theme we have here. So we have here in our notes, there's a bonus content. We've kind of alluded to this. So I guess we could roll through this maybe in 3 or 4 minutes and then wrap up the episode. But we made some predictions. And for our long-term listeners, who I know listen to every single episode and I know listen to the end because you're all the best. We made some predictions about which Pokemon were back, which ones were kind of back, and which ones were going to be massive flops. And shout out to ZZ for keeping the notes so succinct. Shadow Drapion, Medicham, Noctowl, Cresselia, and Galarian Stunfisk. So I guess we can go quickly just point by point here and kind of recap, but you summed it up perfectly in our discussion.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because all of these Pokemon did have some sort of placement, but to very like varying degrees, I would say. Shadow Drapion is probably the most enigmatic of picks from that list because
Mm-hmm.
it came third and fourth in various LATAM regionals today, and we both thought it would be so back, but it's still kind of on the fringes of the meta, but still like relevant enough to take home multiple medals. So I would say it's like almost fully back, but not quite yet in that upper category that we've already like suspected it to be in. But maybe the fact that Feraligatr appears to be on the rise could help it out because with that dark typing, it does resist Shadow Claws, and with the pacing to Aqua Tail, it may be able to get to its second charge attack faster after connecting with a Crunch. So Drapion potentially on the rise, maybe. Certainly one worth exploring. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then Noctowl, as we alluded to, there's just one ninth place that it has going for it. I think that is already like close to a miracle run for this Pokemon, but it did better than I expected it to do, which like
Yeah.
okay, I will take that loss. Same with Medicham, where I was cautiously optimistic, but I did make the claim that Cresselia would perform better than Medicham. Medicham became a champion, Cresselia only became a runner-up. So I would say that if we had to rank between the two, Medicham would certainly be in that we are so back tier, whereas Cresselia is in the tentative middle tier still. And then Galarian Stunfisk, it did came up on Brandino's team in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fun to follow. But it does actually have the worst record out of the five, so it probably is closer to Noctowl tier than to the other guys.
I love that Noctowl has a tier named after it. That it's just hogwash if it's at that level.
Oh man.
Um, I have a few anecdotes to kind of toss on top of this. So, in terms of the Drapion, you know what? If it's King Alexander's Drapion from Houston that gets every single crunch debuff, I think that Pokemon would be back in spades. But I don't. Unfortunately, I don't think everyone has that. The Metachamp shout out. I think that's a really really cool pick to see it pick up. It's also, I think, overtaking Annihilate pretty significantly in terms of usage. So that's something we didn't really expect to see coming in, but it's just a perfect environment for it. Dynamic Punch is so fast. Ice Punch gives you such good coverage versus a lot of the flying type Pokemon that are currently in the meta. Yeah, in terms of Noctowl, yeah, whatever. Galarian Stunfisk, it looks good on paper. It's got an elite defensive typing. It just feels like it's underwhelming and it can't quite keep up the pace. I think my argument in the previous episode was that so many Pokemon have gained coverage moves. You have Pokemon with Flamethrower. You have Pokemon like Fortress that got Sand Tomb. They don't have to reach all the way for the Earthquake. You've got Quagsire in every team. You've got Sand Attack Corviknight. This is not the Steel Wing or Air Slash Steel Flyer Skarmory that we saw in the past. This is a Sand Attack Corviknight with the potential to boost and a payback. So I just think there's too much coverage, and it's kind of like Galarian Stunfisk walks into the forest and doesn't really see any threats, but then they appear around every tree and every branch. So it's kind of like you can't really navigate your way through. But that was a really fun exercise. We'll see what Cresselia decides to do in terms of the upcoming events. But yeah, this was a really fun one, ZZ. It looks like we're at an hour and a half, and we're successfully wrapping up Sevilla as well as Houston and Curitiba, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And yeah, what a fun, lighthearted and joyous episode.
Yeah, like the future of Pokemon Go PvP appears to be bright as of post Sevilla. Let's see what the future holds. I bet Orlando will be just a fantastic time for everybody involved.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be full of shooting stars, and there's not going to be a fire that burns everything down that we're trying to build, right? So, anyway, ZZ, fun time with you per usual. Like you alluded to, we're actually going to record another episode right after this one. So, if you enjoyed the show, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow, subscribe, and stay tuned because we're going to post another one in quick succession now that we're back. Well, ZZ, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts. I think I'm ready to stretch my legs and then get back into it.
Yeah, I'll just like, I don't know. I'll stand up. I'll walk a couple, but I'll be back in just 5 minutes for the next episode. So don't go anywhere.
Well, I'll tell you what, ZZ, when you stand up and you celebrate finishing an episode, you better be very, very gentle with those headphones. All right. All right. See you soon.
I cannot hear you anymore. But I'm sure everything's all right.